Hi, my name is Max Charlton, and my partner Maxwell McCleary and I have chose to do our causal loop diagram over the Challenger space shuttle disaster. And the disaster was a space shuttle going for a flight, and it blew up. And our diagram is about the events that led up to the disaster and it blowing up in the sky. As we start off on our B1 goes to pressure to launch, and they're getting pressure to launch because everyone around them is pushing to get up into the space to the moon and the space race, all that stuff with the Soviets. And in this balancing loop, after it goes to pressure to launch, it goes to the assumption of successful flights, which they were, but there was also problems with the O-rings, technical difficulties, stuff they couldn't really explain at the time. But this also pushed it to pressure to stay on the schedule. And to stay on the schedule, they had to, I guess, bypass most of these flaws or negative things happening that they couldn't really explain that kept getting the successful flights. But they knew at some point something was going to happen, but they didn't really pay attention to that. As we go to R1, we go to the rough weather conditions. And leading up to this, there was rough weather conditions. And being deemed from the engineers saying they probably shouldn't fly or go at this time, maybe push it back a little bit or even go earlier. But they decided to go with this. And then when this flight took off, the weak O-rings in the previous flights that were getting burnt through the two in the booster pods, they were getting, I guess, melted through or burnt through, but they were still being successful at points. But when these weak O-rings fled through, both of them got burnt and destroyed. And this comes to the concerns from the engineers, which they also pointed their viewpoints out of they probably shouldn't do this. They should run more tests and make it more safer and make adjustments to what needs to be happened to make sure nothing in a negative point happens. And this goes to two different things: the management of the higher ups in NASA and who they were dealing with. They basically brushed this over on a point where they just wanted to get the flight into the air, or the shuttle into the air, which we already know when they went up there quickly, something negative happened. And then it also goes to issues with pressures from management, because management, they're pressuring all the engineers and all the technicians to get this built, get on schedule, stay on schedule, and they kind of over pushed them to a sense where they kind of just did what they could at the time to get this shuttle ready to go for a flight. And as we all know, it went back to the space shuttle disaster where it was not a successful flight. And as we go to R2, the brush over by management concerns, again, we know what happened there. They basically pushed everything under the rug. They didn't want the stuff getting out, yet they thought with the successful flights that this would be possible, but we all know it didn't. This reduced the risk awareness. They didn't pay attention to this. They wanted to get this into the sky and basically, I guess, race everyone around them. And then to the perception of flight risk, with the weak O-rings, all the technical difficulties they had or technical issues, as you can see, the ignorance to technical issues that it pushed to that, they just bypassed all of this. They didn't make the right calls. They weren't safe enough. The preparation was not good enough, and it was just not a all-around successful instance. Back to the reduced risk awareness, but it goes back to the successful flights, because yes, they did have some successful flights, but in the end, there was going to be a time where one wasn't right and something went wrong, etc. And then we go to the confidence in the engineers built shuttles, the technicians and everyone with the NASA space program. They were all confident in what they have built because of all the successful flights, and again, it was bound to happen. Something like this was going to happen. And then the weak O-rings, each time there was something burning, the attention to recurring issues was extremely bad, and to a sense where they just brushed it over and wanted to keep going with the successful timeline they had. And you're also getting pressure from the United States. They want to see these shuttles go into the sky. I mean, I would love to see one of these happen, but again, it just goes back to the safety of everyone around them. Thank you.